The debate in Washington over Comey's firing and how our former U.S. attorney responds, plus the ever-changing 2018 governor's race. And a look at one family's immigration battle. It's not as clear-cut as you'd think. A One Detroit in-depth story. It's all coming your way on My Week right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there, and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a lot coming up for you, including a closer look at one woman's story as she faces deportation. It's a look inside the system and the process as it happens. Plus, we are debating some of the biggest headlines this week. Comey's out, Dan Kildee doesn't want to be governor, and the high cost of insurance in Detroit. So let's get to it with our My Week contributors at the table. Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Hi, guys. It's always good to see you.
Yes.
Good week so far?
Yeah.
A pretty
Quiet
busy week. Yeah.
Quiet week, nothing going on.
No, nothing's ever going on in the news. So I was picking up the paper and I read Nolan's column the other day. We all heard the news that Dan Kildee, Congressman Dan Kildee from the Flint area, who there was a lot of speculation that he would run for governor, but instead he decides the best work that he can do is in Congress right now, which opens up the race in a couple of different ways. And the name that came out this week that I read in your column was Mark Bernstein, and we know now that he has been going around saying, I'm really interested in running for governor.
Thinking about.
Well, he's thinking about it. He's thinking very seriously about it.
He said he's interested. Now, he didn't say he was in. He's got a lot of things to consider, family things, as well as what he told me was that, you know, he wants to make sure he can run a civil campaign. He's not interested.
Is that possible when we say civil campaign?
I mean,
these
if you
days?
look the mood of the nation and everybody's screaming at each other, you can't even, you know, somebody can't even give a commencement speech without being screamed at. I doubt there'll be much civility in the 2018 campaign. I think it'll look like some kind of third world brawl. But, you know, Kildee's departure opened up the door because there are a lot of Democrats who aren't sold on Gretchen Whitmer or her ability to win this. And, you know, Bernstein, obviously one of them. I mean, Kildee wanted the unions to clear the way for him. They wanted them to force her out so he could run a sure thing primary. Remember, he's the only guy in this race so far who has a job at risk. He would have to leave Congress to run, and he did not want to go through a bruising primary or an expensive primary. They didn't do that, and so he got out. Now Democrats are fishing. They're looking around for another choice.
All right, so if they're fishing and they're looking around a little bit, and they've had a couple of years to really kind of get some stuff together, because in terms of, you've got a governor who's serving for 8 years in a Republican Party who could be vulnerable. Is this the right pick? And what would someone have to say to Mark Bernstein to convince him to jump into this race?
Well, I mean, so, you know, Mark runs the firm, the law firm that they own, and he'd have to find somebody to do that. That maybe sounds easy, but his brother is on the Supreme Court now. He can't do it. That I think would be one of the primary personal concerns. His sister might be able to do it, but does she want to do? You know, these things are all very tricky. Mark and I have known each other a really long time, dating back to our time at University of Michigan together. I think the world of him. He is one of the brightest people I know. He understands policy in a way that a lot of people who've spent a lot of time in public positions don't understand policy. And the civility thing is genuine with him. I mean, Mark does not, he has strong beliefs and he pursues those, but he does not ever, I can't think of a time of Mark really getting after somebody personally, of dragging a debate down rather than trying to elevate it. And I think he could actually set that tone for 2018, that would be good. The question for Democrats is again, electability. I think you have to start with who has a shot to really match Bill Schuette, who is, like him or hate him, somebody who has been around a long time.
And or Brian Calley. We still haven't heard
and
what
or
his
Brian
plans
Calley.
are.
But, you know, if the candidate were Schuette, this is someone who's won 2 statewide races already. This is someone who's been around since the early 1980s. Everybody knows him. They know what he's about. I think you have to match that kind of weight, I guess.
So then let me
candidate.
like lob a couple of names out there. You know, the Mike Duggan card is always still out there if that's a situation. Nolan, you're shaking your head.
I
No.
think that would be a sleazy thing for
I don't think he can do
Duggan
that.
to do.
He can't
You
run
can't
now
for mayor,
and-
then win and say, oh, by
then
the way,
turn
I'm
around.
announcing my
that's
Okay,
candidacy.
so that's
the
out.
timing's just wrong on that.
That's out. Mark Hackle, that name is always pops up when it comes time for a governor's race.
I think he's got his own problems in Macomb, fighting with a lot of different factions there, including inside the Democratic Party, not just Republicans. I like Mark Hackle. I don't think he brings the weight that a Mark Bernstein would. I still think you have to think
To
about
take on the
someone
Republican
like
ticket. One more name.
I
I'm
think
gonna.
Hackle could win, and I know he's chomping at the bit to run. A lot of his people close to him are saying, yeah, not this time. This isn't it. And it might not be it, but I know he wants to run.
And if you haven't seen the television commercials for Jeff Feiger 2020, could it be Jeff Feiger 2018? Could he try this one more
Oh
time?
my God, that'd be an answered prayer. wouldn't it?
But the other name I would put out there is Gary Peters,
Right.
who has also won statewide race and won statewide race as a Democrat in a Republican sort of tied year.
You
and
think he
held
would
on
have
to
the weight, the policy experience,
He has
and the
the
name
policy
recognition
experience. He
to
does.
take on
a Bill Schuette.
And he
I think
doesn't have
there's
to risk his seat. Now,
Right, that's also
there
true.
is some damage in running and losing, and then having to run again. In 2020?
20.
But I don't think. I don't think he'll do it. I think he could probably win it. But you go back to Bernstein. I mean, there's a candidate who looks and sounds a lot like Rick Snyder did on the Republican side. He works across party lines. He's not interested in going out there and saying horrible things about Republicans. Whether that sort of candidate would play in today's Democratic Party, I don't know. You've got to factor in the Bernie Sanders wing, which is growing in strength, and none of these candidates we've thrown out on the table have particular appeal to them.
I think civility in politics is a really interesting topic to go more in depth in, and if we can
one of
ever
the
really,
chamber's pillars on Mackinac.
achieve that. We'll be talking about that up at Mackinac. Hey, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what's been happening in Washington, D.C., and I don't think that you can walk by cable news or newspaper without knowing about the firing of James Comey. What I thought was interesting was the column that Barbara McQuaid, the former U.S. attorney, who we all know fairly well, wrote an op-ed and talking about that she believes that he has always had the best interests in heart, and he's always gone with whatever facts he has and not political persuasion. But the last line of her column was interesting to me because she said, at some point, someone at a very high level will have to decide whether to file charges. We can only hope that decision will be made by an independent leader. And I think the firing of Comey has thrown into question the independence of whatever the next leader of the FBI is. Nolan, you're making a face.
Well,
I'm gonna go to you
there's a
first.
lot of disingenuousness here. When you think about last week, you had Democrats blaming James Comey for stealing the election for Donald Trump. Chuck Schumer standing up and saying, I've lost trust in his ability to run the department, and organizing this attack campaign on Comey to try to force Trump to fire him. Trump fires him, and now, oh my God, that's the worst thing that ever
But
happened.
isn't it funny, like as a news guy, but don't you really see that and you say, gosh, if I've made them mad on both sides, maybe I'm kind of doing something right?
I don't question James Comey's skills, his integrity, his independence, but he got himself in the middle of a really bitter and nasty election campaign last year. He was a ping pong ball. He does one thing, Republicans love him, Democrats hate him, and then reverse, and it went back and forth. And I think he's compromised. Neither Republicans nor Democrats trust him. Had Trump not fired him, he would have been the subject of relentless attacks from the Democratic resistance. I think he had to go. I think this investigation, if it goes to Rod Rosenstein, the deputy director of the Justice Department, is in good hands. He's a career career Justice Department person, not particularly political. I think you can trust him, and I think we should see what he can do with it.
But if you keep saying that word trust, and I'm fearful that what has happened, though, has eroded the public trust and that our law enforcement is acting apolitically.
Of course.
Well, I mean, I don't think they have much trust to begin with, and the president hasn't helped that in any way with the way that he's, attacked the judiciary, attacked the FBI in the past. I mean, this is somebody who's pretty reckless in the way that he engages in rhetoric and now action that really undermines the integrity of the judicial system. Think about last week, or was it this week, where he's tweeting about Sally Yates and her testimony before she testifies. So you've got the commander-in-chief essentially engaging in witness intimidation on social media before this person goes and testifies before Congress. I mean, it's the pattern of behavior here that is disturbing, and the specter of the investigation into this administration that sort of lurks in the background. It's not believable, for instance, that Donald Trump's not thinking about that Russia investigation when he fires James Comey, not on the first day that he comes to office, which would have been the timing.
Which do you believe that that's what should have happened if he was going to get rid of him?
If he was going to get rid of him
January 20th?
for the things that he did during the election, that would have been the time to do it. Bill Clinton fired the FBI attorney, the FBI director on the first day because he was concerned. He was concerned about his integrity. He didn't think he was doing the right thing.
And that's what Trump should have done. I mean,
but doing it now makes it seem like it's about Russia.
Comey was completely compromised. Last week, Hillary Clinton stood up and said, "This man cost me the election." I don't see how he could have effectively done his job. Now, the timing of this, as usual with Trump, is atrocious. The method is atrocious. But Comey had to go. And I think the challenge now, he cannot replace Comey with a Rudy Giuliani or a Chris Christie.
But he'll
Well, no one's going to.
He can't do that.
Have any faith in that.
He's got to replace Comey now. I mean, the acting director perhaps is a good choice for now. He's got to replace him with somebody who has the ability to restore trust and is not a partisan.
More important, Republicans in Congress have got to force him to do that, and they haven't forced him to do much of anything yet.
And we'll have to see.
We're waiting for them to wake up.
We'll have to see. I did want to talk about de-insurance. We're going to have to table it for next week. It was a great series in the Free Press, but we are going to have to leave it right there. Tonight, we have a closer look at one woman's deportation battle. We first met Maria over a month ago when Detroit Public Television did a show in Southwest Detroit. We're always listening for stories, and we're trying to connect with communities to learn and find issues that we should be looking at. Well, a lot of people in that community were talking about their concerns about immigration and deportation. And that's where we found out about Maria from her attorney. Maria has been living in the U.S. since she was a baby, and she now lives in Southwest Detroit with her own family. And she's set to be deported by the end of the month. We wanted to walk through the process and see exactly how things worked, what changed, why she has to leave now. So here at One Detroit, we teamed up with Bridge Magazine, our reporting partners with the Detroit Journalism Cooperative. This isn't a story about President Trump's current policies or President Obama's past ones, and it's not also as black and white as you would think it would be. But it's a unique look at one family's navigation of the system as it is happening right now.
Maria Garcia Juarez lives in Southwest Detroit with her husband Eric and 1.5-year-old son David. They are U.S. citizens, but she's not. Born in Mexico, arriving with her mother undocumented at just 8 months old. America is all she knows. So in 3 weeks, what happens?
I have to leave the country or they will come and get me. I have to go back to my officer on the 16th of this month, and I have to show her a ticket leaving before the 25th of this month.
Going where?
To Mexico, straight to Mexico.
What do you know then?
Nobody. I know I have family there. I don't know them. I don't have communication with them, but I have to go.
You have to buy your own ticket.
Yes, they can purchase it for me. Mm-hmm. They said they can purchase it for me, but they're gonna purchase it wherever they want. You're gonna throw me anywhere.
Have you bought a ticket?
No, I have not. I haven't bought it yet.
Where are you gonna go?
To be completely honest, I don't know right now. I really do not know. I'm still hopeful that a miracle can happen, something can happen.
I knew I can make you smile. When the day comes, Maria doesn't want to take her son with her. David has medical issues she fears can't be treated in Mexico. An even bigger complication? In January, her husband was diagnosed with leukemia. He's getting special treatments just to stay alive. Maria might have been a typical DACA case, someone who came to America as a child and now is allowed to stay. But at 17, she was arrested in Salinas, California, where she used to live.
I committed a crime. I was in a stolen vehicle. I was caught in a stolen vehicle twice.
Maria was behind the wheel, even leading police on a high-speed chase. Gangs and crime were a part of life in Salinas. Her mother was arrested, then deported, while Maria and her sister were placed in the care of a family with its own criminal connections.
As young, naive little girls, we really didn't know anything better. I mean, we grew up around that environment. We saw our mother doing it, and our dad was never in the picture, so what was there to expect?
Maria was released from juvenile detention at the age of 18, joining an aunt and sister in Michigan.
It's when we were really, really small.
These past 5 years, Maria's been something of a model citizen, gainfully employed, taking college classes, but always under the watch of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. She's got a tether, so they always know where she is.
When it's green, it's good. That means they have signal. I mean, I guess I have to be grateful that at least I'm here with this instead of being in jail.
Maria's husband, Eric, has lost his hair from chemotherapy, so he's camera shy, but he wants to talk. He's 22 years old.
The truth is that in the next few weeks, my wife's gonna be gone. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do with my son. Gotta figure out how I'm gonna do with my sickness. Try to stay strong.
The story you just saw really is just a first step to understanding the process. We know that you have a lot of questions too, and we want to put this in context. So with me now is the reporter for Bridge on the Story, Chastity Pratt-Dawsey. Chastity, it's good to see you.
Hey.
It's
interesting, right?
Yeah, it sure is. And also with us is Diego Bonasade. He's the legal director for Michigan United, an organization that helps people with immigration issues. Diego, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Chastity, let me start with you. When you started reporting this story and talking with Maria and speaking really with immigration attorneys, looking at her case and surrounding everything, how would you characterize how her story is playing into the larger conversation that we're having all across the state, really in the country, about immigration and about the processes that people are going through in deportation?
Well, since the new administration has taken office, and Diego, you can attest to this, there's been a lot of concern, a lot of conversation, obviously, because the Trump administration has changed the policies that were in place during the Obama administration. Now, the thing about Maria's case is her case very definitely started under the former administration.
She got the notice in June that she was going to have to
got a notice
go back
last
to
year that she could voluntarily leave, and she didn't. She kept appealing and appealing and appealing. And in April, she got what could be the last word saying, you know, it's time to go by the end of May. And her lawyer believes that had this been the former administration and the former policies that prioritized who would be targeted for deportation, then maybe she would have been able to stay and adjust her status differently. But that's not the case here.
So you're seeing a priority change. Diego, I want to ask you about that momentarily, but Chastity, I do, before I leave you, talk a little bit about the numbers. And you talked to ICE, a spokesperson from there. Tell us a little bit about what the numbers we're seeing in terms of deportations and people with criminal backgrounds who are being asked to leave the country, or told to leave the country. Right.
Here in the Detroit ICE office deals with Michigan and Ohio. And since October 1st, there's been about 1,400, nearly 1,500 people deported from Michigan and Ohio, and about half of those have been people with criminal records. And that's on pace to be 50% higher than the prior year.
So, Diego, we said at the beginning of the story, you know, this is part of the legacy of the Obama administration because obviously it was triggered that Maria would have to leave last June. But we're also looking at now what policies from the Trump administration are we looking at that are affecting people who are concerned about having to leave the country. What are you seeing in terms of a priority change and who is being asked to leave?
So one part of it is the priority change originally under the Obama administration. Number one was national security. Terrorism, spies, saboteurs. Number two was people with serious felony records. Number three was repeat immigration offenders, people who'd been deported and returned. Now, when you look at the Trump administration, it says people convicted of anything. So that could include people with misdemeanor, you know, driving without a license or driving without proof of insurance or that kind of thing. People accused and people suspected. So they're going way farther in terms of comparison to the Obama administration. And while they may increase their numbers, I think they may be focusing less on people with serious records. The Trump administration, for example, there's a unit that in Homeland Security of about 6,200 field agents that investigate human trafficking, drug trafficking, and other serious crimes that take longer term investigations. They want to turn those people towards picking up random undocumented immigrants. So if they do that, if you're going to take your eye off that ball and go to just general deportations, something's going to suffer, right? Something's got to give. And so the people with more serious criminal records, in my opinion, we're going to be seeing fewer of those and larger numbers of people with no records at all.
So how is Maria's story typical or not typical? Or is it something that when you cover something like this and we're talking about this issue, there is really no such thing as a typical story? So what, I mean, what's kind of out of,
I mean, I'm surprised that even with a juvenile criminal record, that she's stayed so long, but she really has a compelling case, right? I mean, this is, she's got a family now. Her husband is suffering an illness. She has a child. From what I saw, and I'm not confirmed, but it sounds like she would be able to immigrate. And part of the problem is that they want her to leave, and then she's going to have the consular process, and you're going to have a year-long, maybe more, separation.
I was just going to say, how long that process is if she wanted to try to come back into the country because she's got a child here?
It's going to be, I'd figure, just given the paperwork that has to happen, I'd figure at least a year. And that's part of the issue. It's like, what is it going, if she's already paid for those offenses when she was a juvenile, what is the country going to gain from separating this family at this moment of, you know, a child who needs assistance here and then a husband who is facing leukemia? And
I think that's what the bigger conversation is also in this, Chastity, in doing this story and in Bridge publishing this story, and I think rounding out a lot of the emotional part of the story and hearing Maria's story, but backing it up with a lot of the numbers that are surrounding that. This is a situation that many people face, or they're concerned about different parts of their history coming back and affecting where they are now.
Right, and you hit it right on the head. It's, from what I can tell, and I'm in no way an expert, there are so many different scenarios. Every case is different. Every immigration judge or field officer has got to, you know, chime in, and things can go very differently for very different people. But with Maria, I think the compelling case is just that if our immigration policy is meant to protect national security, is meant to, you know, enforce law and order, really, what benefit is it to the United States citizenry for her to be deported? She's been here since she's an infant, and she's sort of like a foreigner here and a foreigner there. And so what does the United States gain from her leaving, if only to send her there to file paperwork and come back?
I would assume that this story is going to spark a lot of questions from families. Diego, what would you tell other people that you're working with and other families who have deportation concerns and immigration concerns?
I mean, first of all, to know what the situation is. So if a person is not in proceedings, they really need to understand what happens if ICE knocks on their door? What happens if they're on the verge of fixing their papers? So there's people who've been here 20 plus years. Their kids who are born here are turning 21, and that means that they can petition for them. The problem is that if it turns into a trap, because they can start the first half, the child can petition for them when they're 21, but when they leave, because they've been here for a year or longer without papers, they trigger a 10-year bar to coming back, and they can't get it waived based on the child, right? So there's things that people need to know, both about the path they're taking to ultimately fix their papers, as well as what happens when ICE knocks on your door, and what rights do you have, and who should you call, and what kind of numbers you should memorize.
And you're going to keep following this, Chastity?
Absolutely. She's set to leave at the end of the month, and folks here at DPTV are going to continue to follow her, and we'll be writing about the outcome.
Chastity Pratt-Jazzy, Diego Bonasati, thank you so much for joining me. Go to our website, myweek.org, for the link to Chastity's article for Bridge. It will be there. Plus, we will continue to follow this story and update you as things progress. Maybe it has sparked questions for you. You can always tell us what you think on Facebook and on Twitter. That's going to do it for My Week. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.